Nihilism is a rogue militant. It influences every individual and aspect of society. We must understand what it is, why it is, and how it influences us. We'll do that here. Joel had picked up gardening because the only feeling he truly had towards life was hate. It wasn't necessarily hatred towards the world, although his short fuse made it seem like it. Even now, it is yet to be determined if his resentment was directed towards himself or God. Can one feel resentment towards God while also claiming to not believe in God? It is curious to ask whether it is the disbelief or the resentment that comes first. When Joel finally vocalized some vulnerable honesty, he told the master gardener that it was not hell he feared or opposed, but rather any continuation of life. It was mere existence that he could no longer bear. He wished only that he could fall asleep without any dreams and forever. The master gardener thought. Desire has a strong influence on our hearts. Our heart is where we house belief. The elegance of the most immaculate Monet painting couldn't be seen by one whose heart has been corrupted by doubt. I may look at a painting and see a sea of lavender tulips and lime-collared fields that send me back to a walk I had with my mother and sister as a child. Whereas a blackened heart would see a rectangular piece of paper that another man slapped together in order to extract attention and money from onlookers. But I must ask, Joel, why do you believe that you desire an end to existence? Joel replied, I don't want to live as myself or anyone else. Truthfully, where is joy or even contentment? Life is like being tortured with a drop of water dripping on your forehead. It's constant pain. Once you become aware of its annoyance, you can't help but become aggravated. Over time, it is the aggravation and insanity of the predicament that will drive anyone who sees it mad. If only that water were dripping on my head for a good reason. If only a benevolent purpose were so, I think I could live life and forget there even was water dripping on my forehead. If it were for a reason, yet, as much as I have searched and tried, I cannot wrap my head around how a benevolent purpose could be possible. To be is to be in an eternal state of checkmate. After listening to Joel's soliloquy, the master gardener looked down at the rows of soil beneath their feet. It had been tilled by hired hands. He then squinted towards the sunset, but he wasn't looking at the sun. He was looking at the craftsmanship of the brick patterns on Joel's mansion. These bricks were laid with the detailed attention of a surgeon operating on a heart. As he gazed at the bricks, the master gardener pondered the value and purpose of walls and roofs. He couldn't think of any purpose of them other than a barrier to keep out from the inside what exists outside, weather, predators, disaster. He wondered if the purpose of walls are protection, yet Joel has nothing he deems worthy of protection. Why does he have walls? The master gardener agreed to advise Joe on the garden's growth, but told him he wouldn't do the work for him. This aggravated Joel. He didn't understand why he would hire someone if he'd be the one to do the work. The master gardener explained how cultivation would be an ongoing process. It would require work each season. He also explained that while it would be nice to have a gorgeous garden in your backyard, it would be invaluable to be a man who can cultivate such garden. Joel didn't understand, but there was something about this man, this master gardener, that he trusted. After his initial reluctance, Joel accepted the proposal. The next morning, as agreed, Joel went out a little after sunrise. He found the gardener waiting for him on the lone park bench outside the length of the soil. Right away, they began working side by side. As they work, Joel isn't outwardly complaining, but he is apprehensive to putting the seeds in the ground and patting the dirt. It's not hard, but the effort is so small that it seems trivial to Joel. However, as they move slowly up and down the rows, the apprehension begins to dissolve. His neck muscles begin to relax, then his shoulders, and so on. The master gardener notices Joel is focused on the task at hand and hollers over to him. "Hey, Joel. Life really sucks, doesn't it?" Joel bursts out in a silent chuckle. The master gardener smiles out a bit of laughter himself, joyful to see Joel happy. The two went on working this way, with the master gardener doing less of the work each day. After a week, he was in a purely overseer role. Eventually, after a few weeks, they agreed that Joel would continue the cultivation and that the master gardener would be available for questions by phone call or in person if necessary. Time passes and they continue to talk on the phone daily. The master gardener shows up 2 to 3 times a week. They rarely talk about Joel's garden. Instead, Joel is interested in the master gardener's story. He wants to know why the master gardener decided to get into gardening. Joel was curious to know more about his family and if he had his own garden. Soon, they were talking about travels, religion, spiritual realities, and everything else, the way friends do. Joel felt fulfilled because, well, he was fulfilling his mission to create a beautiful garden. As the heat of summer intensified, there came a slight change in Joel. When he was working on the garden, his mind was clean and he was at peace, but his hands weren't always busy. The steward of his estate, George, began to notice Joel constantly watching the garden from the giant bay window in the lounge. Yet, George noticed he wasn't watching it the way a painter would sit back and analyze a work in progress. No, he was watching it the way a painter would stare at a painting if he wanted it to finish painting itself into perfection. There was a certain agitation building within Joel, and although he trusted the master gardener, he was beginning to become impatient. One evening, when an absolutely gorgeous sunset was casting rays upon the budding garden, George said to Joel, "So your gaze does not help the plants. They are nourished by the sun. They will grow with time." 3 months left, George, Joel said, tapping his hand nervously against the sofa cushion. If this garden doesn't grow by the end of the season, guess who will get hired back next year? That gardener has done this on purpose so that he can get more pay with no work. I knew that was his intention all along. Joel clears his throat and shakes his head in disappointment. George tried to talk some sense into Joel, but he wasn't listening to any voice that wasn't coming from inside himself. There was one voice speaking louder than all the rest. Doubt. Truthfully, Joel wanted that voice to speak louder than the rest. He'd always liked that voice. He felt that its rebellious nature gave him power. In a most fundamental sense, he identified with that voice of doubt. Now, this voice was rallying. It was rallying a distrust of the master gardener, a distrust of the established garden practices, and it was aiming at a distrust of existence itself. Finally, after going back and forth for quite some time, George raised his voice. "It is not your garden that has been blossoming new life, Joel. It has been your mind. The lenses you had chosen to wear made the world seem dreadful and gray and mush. This journey you've been on has brought back the colors into your life. I've seen it. If the garden inside of you is beautiful, so too will the one on the outside be." Joel slowly stands up to face George and responds, "I have witnessed everything my hands have done, and all that I have toiled to achieve. It has all been meaningless, like chasing after the wind." With that, Joel walked out of the lounge and into isolation of his study. There he resolved to fire the master gardener, rid his mind of all he had been taught, and continue on his own. What does it mean to be nihilistic? What does it mean to be nihilistic? Nihilism is a worldview, and it requires, regardless of how you perceive the world, regardless of what your worldview is, to be nihilistic requires one very important aspect, one very important ingredient, which is randomness. Randomness. There is a consensus worldview that breathes nihilism, and it is the worldview of what? The worldview of what are things? What is everything? What has happened? Plot without theme. And it is the accepted ethos that everybody, that it's as though it's so accepted that maybe you can intentionally contend with it on an individual basis, but as a collective, we passively accept it to be true. It is, everything started with an explosion, giant explosion that came from all of the matter and energy in the world being condensed to the size of a pinhead. All of the matter and energy in the world was condensing into the side of the pinhead, and because there was so much built up energy, it exploded. Entropy. Entropy begins to take place. Now, certainly don't ask why there is matter. Don't ask why there is energy. Don't ask why it was condensing. That doesn't matter. Just know that is the very first start. Don't ask why. So everything's condensing, Big Bang, explosion, chaos in the universe. Planets are not formed yet because there's just all of the raw materials, raw elements colliding through empty space. Certainly don't ask why there is empty space. Just know that that too is always there. All of this stuff is always there. And so we've got raw matter, raw energy on a path of entropy from this explosion. Collisions, chaos, giant or fractal condensings happening. Fractal condensing of mass starts to occur. And energy gravitates around what we call stars. And the gravity of the star, it becomes so massive that other pieces of mass start to orbit around it because it's gravitating towards the thing, the star. And the gravity of the core of these pieces of matter, mass, the center of mass, is so heavy that it all condenses down into a sphere. So now we've got planets circling around stars. The stars are the main source of their energy. It's illuminating light and radiation outwardly, affecting the planets. And then we've got through that, water came. Water came, and it was random. Everything that has happened so far, everything that has ever began, just happened randomly. Water formed on Earth. We now have boiling soup on Earth. And in this boiling soup, there comes a single-celled organism, life. Energy is contained into this one thing that we call a single-celled organism, and it starts wiggling around because it's got this energy. So now we've got wiggling life, and it's in the boiling soup, thermodynamics. Don't ask why it happened. Don't ask why energy was in that became contained. It is thermodynamics brought forth by the initial entropy, the first domino being pushed. And this energy within the single-celled organism starts to wiggle, and it likes to have this energy. It likes to have energy contained within it to harness the energy, but it can't have the energy harnessed forever, so it splits off. Wiggles so much, splits off. Now there's two single-celled organisms. Now, why did it do that? Just RNA. It had RNA. What is RNA? Information. How did information come from? Even better question. Why did information come from what we just started off with, which was mass or matter and energy and even the entropy? How did RNA come to be? Why did it come to be? Doesn't matter. Random. That too is random. Everything is random. Then we've got competition, because these single-celled life forms like to have they like to harness energy, so they keep splitting off, but then they keep evolving because now survival of the fittest takes over. They want to harness energy, so they start to evolve, and the ones that can harness energy the best, the ones that can survive the best, are the ones that keep splitting off. Now we've got more than single-celled organisms. This water that's on Earth, this boiling soup, thermodynamics, starts to be creatures within the water. The single-celled organism ends up blossoming into creatures. And now that we've got creatures going around, the competition is heightened, and they need to keep surviving, and they're going to survive by any means necessary. So they're like, there's food on the land. Let's go up on on the land and get that food. Yeah, we breathe the water, but let's just figure it out. Let's find out how we can get on land. So they go on land for a temporary amount of time, get food, come back. Those who go on land for a short amount of time start going on land for a longer amount of time. Now we've got land animals. Very, very heavy competition for survival. Dinosaurs, giant tails, hard to mate, doesn't matter. Comet, explosion. Let's try again. Comet destroys everything. Try again. Now we've got monkeys, apes. They're curious. They become conscious. They become aware of their own consciousness. They become aware of their own mortality. So now we've got consciousness. Now here I am. So after all of that, here I am. Here's you, here's me. And all of that started randomly, so we are kind of sad. We're kind of sad because we're just here randomly, and for some reason we thought that there might be a theme to this story, but we're told that there's not a theme, so that kind of makes us sad. But then we realize that because there's not an actual why to existence, there's not an actual objective reason to exist. Oh, okay, we can do whatever we want, so now we've got freedom. So it's all random. Now we've got freedom. And then we engage with that freedom. We start to exercise that freedom, follow our impulses, follow our nature, and then we become sadder, sad again, depressed, yearning for purpose, objective purpose. And that's where we're at right now. So that is the consensus worldview that our society, we collectively have come to accept, and the honey of it, the the sweetness of it is what I alluded to with you can do whatever you want. If there is no objective purpose, you're essentially, we're all just free to, we can still have a purpose, but it's subjective, so we just do whatever you want. But it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And to that question, I would ask, cui bono? Cui bono? As in Latin for who benefits? Who benefits? From that story that we all just passively accept to be true, who benefits? So, what is nihilism? There was a big bang. It happened randomly. All of the mass and energy was condensed into something the size of a pinpoint. Chaos in the universe. Everything's colliding. Planets are forming. Spheres are forming around the stars, and they're orbiting around each other. We go forward. There's single-celled life form in these boiling soups. Thermodynamics, single-celled organisms are fighting to survive. They want to keep harnessing energy. They split off. Now there's more single-celled organisms. They want to keep surviving, so they fight to grow. They evolve. They become more competent. They become more legs, arms, more vicious, more able to survive. Comet destroys everything. Dinosaurs, gone. Monkeys, let's try again. Apes are curious. We start to question our own existence and mortality. We're conscious. Now here we are. Sad. Sad. Cui bono? Who benefits? Who benefits from that story? So, in short, though, that is what nihilism is, and you don't have to, it doesn't have to be that exact worldview, but that is a consensus worldview. The key ingredient is randomness. Everything is randomness. So, separate from cui bono, who benefits, and questioning that whole story, let's just accept that story to be true. Let's say, okay, that story is true. Another question arises on this grand question of why do we become nihilistic, which is, why would you not be nihilistic? So given the what has occurred, the how, why would you not be nihilistic? Life is a story. So again, we are in that place. That's fine. We're in the place of everything started randomly, chaos. But we are in a story, and that is the plot. So everything I just described is the plot. It's what's happening. But it completely disregards the why. As in, there's so many questions there of why. And a nihilistic worldview, the other key component is that it essentially, it doesn't only fail to answer questions of why, of grand questions of why, individual questions of why as well, but it denies their validity. It tells you that that there isn't actually an answer. There is no, if you ask the question of why, truthfully, if you ask the question of why as it relates to the entire universe, then that's like a child's dream. You're a child, and you live in fantasy world. There is no why. But again, we certainly live in a story. All of this is a story. And if all of that is the plot, what it completely disregards is this question of why, this question of essential truth, which, as it relates to what you may call the science of a story, it completely disregards theme. So, if somebody's telling you a story, if you're having a conversation with somebody, or you're watching a movie, reading a book, and they just start hammering you with facts. This morning I woke up and I brushed my teeth. Then I went to the grocery store. After I went to the grocery store, I walked out to my car. After I walked out to my car, I drove back to my house. After I drove back to my house, I took a shower, read a book. If they're just hammering you with things of what's happening, any normal person, not even any normal person, any person is going to listen to that or see that and think, why are you telling me this? Why are you telling me this? They're going to utter the words either internally or to you. Hey, what's the point? What's the point of this? So humans have a proclivity and an ability to not only digest stories, whereas we can't even sometimes remember what we did yesterday. We can't comprehend one sentence, but somehow if you put a bunch of sentences together and now you've got 5,000 sentences, if they are put together in a coherent way and there's a theme involved, that is, there's a story, somehow we can understand the all 1,000 sentences. We can't remember what we did yesterday, but we can remember something important that happened when we were young, child, 10 years old. You can certainly remember some things that happened when you were young. So if we have the ability to digest stories, comprehend stories, and a proclivity to have a reason why we're being told the stories, a proclivity to understand the theme, the purpose. In that same way, life is like a story, and if you go through your entire life without a purpose, and you just do the story that I just described, you just start brushing your teeth and going to the store and then leaving the store, it's the greatest toxin that everybody talks about all the time of like, I hate a 9-to-5 job. I can't stand my life. I can't stand the monotony of the things that I'm doing. Well, it's clearly because you don't have a theme. You don't have a purpose. There's not a reason to be doing those things. I mean, there might be, you might have immediate needs and you might be fulfilling your immediate needs, and they might have you in something like a prison. But you're not aligned with the point that I'm making, which is there is an objective theme. The universe itself is a giant story. The universe itself is a grand story. And we all play a role in this grand story. And if you're out of alignment with not necessarily what I would call your role, but because there is certainly you can do different things within the theme, but if you're not aligned with the grand theme of the universe, of life, of existence, certainly you're going to feel bad. And you're going to ask yourself, what's the point? In some way, you're going to ask yourself, why am I alive? And when you ask yourself, why am I alive, there's an opportunity. The opportunity there is that you now have a chance to answer that question through your actions. You have a chance to in everything that you do, your life, the entirety of your life, the entirety motif of your life, all of your speech, thought, and action, although you'll certainly fall away, it's ideal if you ask that question of, why am I alive? And then the universe reveals to you the truth of why you're alive. And then you start to do the right thing, and your whole life becomes an alignment of your speech, thought, and action to try to properly answer that question. And yes, again, you'll certainly fall away, but as we all do. But when we're in that sort of flow, when we're in that proper alignment, that is ideal. That is the way. So, why would somebody not be nihilistic? Life is a story. The whole universe is a grand story. We have been told the truth of the plot. We have been told the truth of what has happened and what is happening. Sometimes we have not been told the truth, but overall we know what is happening. But what is more relevant is why. Why am I alive? And when you ask that question of why am I alive, your whole life becomes an attempt to align your thought, speech, and actions with having your entire existence be a motif of properly answering that question of why am I alive, and then your life story has a proper theme aligned with the theme of the universe. So now we are to the point of this question. We know what nihilism is. We know what it means to be nihilistic. We know why you would not be nihilistic. And that, obviously, what I've just said about why somebody would not be, that certainly is not the only pathway to not be nihilistic. But it does line up. As in, if you ask yourself that question, why am I alive, and you genuinely want to know the answer, you realize that there is an objective answer. It's not just a subjective thing that you're choosing, but there's an objective answer. And the only way to properly become intimated with it, come close to that grand theme, is through every moment of your entire life. But now that we've answered both of those two questions of what does it mean to be nihilistic and why would someone not be nihilistic, we now have to ask, why do we become nihilistic? So in the inversion of why would someone not be nihilistic, of which there are a lot of reasons. Maybe it's all essentially the same reason. That is what I would say. It's essentially the same reason, even if it looks different, but it's the same reason. But why in the face of that would someone why do we become nihilistic? Why do we become nihilistic? So in this story, we've got Joel. Joel starts off, and at the beginning of the story, I wouldn't say that he's nihilistic. I would say that he's cynical, because he's even vocalizing this almost humble uncertainty about the nature of reality. And he says that he just can't wrap his mind around a way that there would be a grand theme of the universe, that there would be a benevolent purpose. And because he cannot wrap his head around it, he's falling, and he vocalizes that he's not even looking for something like the honey of an afterlife and a desire to go to hell or heaven rather. He just wants to go to sleep. He wants to cease to exist. He wants to go to sleep without dreams, and he wants that to be the case forever. So he's in a state of misery at the beginning. And then he builds a relationship with the gardener. And as we saw in the previous story, in the previous episode, he doesn't have a lot of friends, it seems like. It doesn't seem like Joel's got a bunch of friends, which is at least a major part of the problem, certainly. Joel doesn't have a lot of friends. And his intention of what we came to find out in the previous chapter of the story is that his long-term intention for building a beautiful garden is so that he can prove to people that he can show people what he is. He can show people that he's capable of cultivating and owning a gorgeous, immaculate place of peace. And the way that I think about it, it's a story, so you could perceive it in different ways, but it seems to me like Joel is miserable. It doesn't seem like he's miserable. He's certainly miserable. But it seems like because he's miserable, he's trying to convince other people that he is not miserable by inviting them to see his garden. Because if he can convince other people that he's miserable, that he's not haunted, internally haunted and tormented every day, then maybe he can convince himself, and maybe he can believe it as well. But that's his state of cynicism, and the story goes on, and he goes out of the cynical state, and he takes the wisdom of the master gardener, the garden master. He takes the wisdom of the master gardener, and he trusts this individual, and he accepts established garden practices. He believes these things to be valuable and true. And it helps get him out of his cynical, pessimistic mindset. He starts to go towards optimism. While he's working, he's at peace. But he's got this seed of a problem within inside of him. And when he's talking to George, it fully makes itself manifest, which is that nihilism and cynicism and pessimism, if you got to give the darkness its due, and it is a way to perceive yourself as an individual. And there's a line in there where it says Joel likes that voice of doubt. Joel sees himself as that voice of doubt being his true self. So we don't yet know what has happened in Joel's past, but something has happened that he is very skeptical of people. He's very distrusting of people. And although he has gotten help from the gardener, he lets this voice of doubt blossom in his mind. And this voice of doubt it starts to rail and rally against the master gardener, the truth of established garden practices, and it's aiming towards tearing down Joel's newfound optimism towards existence itself. So why would we get to that point? Why would we disregard everything that we've discovered to be of value and instead go towards pessimism, doubt? Betrayal is a painful experience. You trust someone, and that person that you trust, you are in a vulnerable spot, but you see them as somebody that can help you, and you're doing something like crying out for help, and so you decide to trust someone, and then you get into a spot where you absolutely need them, you're more vulnerable, and in that moment that you need them, you put your entire weight on them, and they let you fall. They let you fall, and when they let you fall, you realize that everything that they had told you might be false, because they never actually had your best interest in heart. They were helping you or capitalizing off of your temporary vulnerability so that they could extract from you your time, energy, possessions. They wanted to get something from you, and you trusted that individual. You thought that they cared about you, and you were misled. You were betrayed. And we can be betrayed by ideas as well. We see ideas as potentially truthful and beneficial, and whether it's a religious idea, philosophical idea, something that we find in a story, we start to act out that idea, and then we realize that something happens and that idea doesn't actually work, and then we become skeptical and pessimistic, and a doubt forms inside of us that there actually isn't any truth, because that doubt protects us from being betrayed in the future. So, that is Joel. Joel has... We don't know why Joel is the way that he is quite yet, but Joel is very skeptical of other people, and because he's skeptical of other people, he identifies with this voice of doubt in his mind because he wants to protect himself from being betrayed. He is afraid. And it all comes back to fear. Rather than seeing that the truth that some people do betray you, and deciding, all right, I'm going to stay awake and willingly trust people anyway because it's better to trust people than to not trust people. He's got this idea that he is going to not trust anyone anymore. And he went away from that for just a moment, but now it is raging inside of him again. And he is going to start to work on this garden on his own. So, that's where we're at right now. Joel is in a state of nihilism. We know what will transpire in the future. We don't know when it'll transpire relative to the story, but something happens. And like in the previous episode, he then has a garden. He shows it to me, first person perspective, main character. Maybe not main character, but first person perspective. But he's currently in the complete dark, and he's on his own, and it's just him and George. So let's figure out why Joel is so skeptical of trusting other people. Let's figure out why Joel is so skeptical of trusting other people. Why do we become nihilistic? Fear, desire, fear of betrayal. To believe that everything is random and that there is no greater theme to life allows us to follow our impulses and do whatever we'd like, although we discover through time that actually just makes us very sad. But the reason why it makes us very sad is because there is an objective theme. There is an objective truth to life, and we have to align ourselves with that objective truth.